Hello everyone, I'm Terrence Rudolph, and I'm the State Conservationist for USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service in Georgia. First, let me tell you and the organizers of this event, thank you. Feral swine has become very detrimental to Georgia's agriculture industry for quite some time now. To tackle this challenge, it's going to take all of us working together in a delicate and synchronized effort. And I really do appreciate the role that each of you play in this fight. While we recognize that there are far more capable members on the team who can get their hands directly involved in the management role, NRCS is committed to utilizing a landscape-level approach to comprehensive conservation planning to address natural resource concerns like feral swine, among others. By looking at all available natural resources and concerns, we are able to offer our customers a roadmap that merges with the management objectives and our conservation standards. Since 2019, Georgia has been one of 10 states utilizing the Federal Swine Eradication and Control Pilot Program to help provide financial assistance for 20 projects through grants to partners for training, equipment, and feral swine trapping. This program is implemented jointly by USDA Animal and Plant Health and Inspection Service and NRCS, and reflects our USDA team effort to help respond to the threat feral swine pose to agriculture, native ecosystem, and human and animal health. What this program does not do is provide financial assistance for the destruction and disposal of trapped feral swine. NRCS is not authorized by Congress to provide financial assistance to destroy these animals. We know that you can call on other USDA agencies or partner organizations to fulfill their respective roles, in addition to helping us to conduct various educational workshops. We value efforts like these to help everyone better understand the full scope of the problem and appreciate the public and private partners involved, and most importantly, the landowners. Folks, this difficult challenge is not small. It's a huge task. This problem has been building for decades, but it has reached a tipping point in many areas that something extraordinary has to be done. And by bringing valuable resources and perspective to the table today and throughout all these workshops, there are better days ahead. Thank you again for allowing me to be part of your program. And if one of our dedicated conservationists located all over Georgia can be of assistance, please find your nearest USDA service center by going to farmers.gov and clicking on the Connect tab. We look forward to meeting you and working with you in the future.
All right, thank you for having me. Appreciate this opportunity to meet with you and review this information on wild pigs and talk about why pigs are such a big deal in the state of Georgia and what we're trying to do about them in the context of these workshops and some of the research that we've got going on. Let's start talking about why we care about pigs, and most of you are probably aware of the variety of damage they cause. I'm just going to run through a few quick pictures. Here's an aerial view of row crops. I don't remember if that's peanuts or soybeans, but they do a terrible amount of damage to row crop agriculture and all other kinds of agriculture, from fruits and berries, hay, fields, pastures, and so on. Getting away from row crops, they're also quite destructive to more managed environments like this golf course, this green on a golf course, an expensive golf course that was torn up one night by pigs. They do a lot of damage to natural resources, streams, forests, by getting into the water and rooting, urinating, defecating, spreading fecal coliforms and possibly diseases. They get into yards and landscapes, possibly creating a nuisance for vehicle traffic. We don't hear about pig vehicle collisions near as much as we hear about deer vehicle collisions, but they can be quite destructive if a vehicle were to strike these animals. And something that I came across not too long ago, a few years ago, out of an Albany newspaper. Here's a picture of pigs got into a cemetery in the Albany area. So we care about pigs because they can be extremely destructive. They're one of the top 100 most destructive invasive species in the world, rated that way by people who know these things from an ecological standpoint and a damage and destructive point of view. We tried to do a number of things to address these issues with pigs and the damage they cause. This workshop and slideshow are part of that effort. And working with our friends at the Georgia Association of Conservation Districts, we have created a revised version of our Georgia feral swine website. So lots of good information here on the website. We have the landowner's guide that you can open and read online or download a PDF version of it, carry with you. If you attend our workshops in person, we also have printed copies of these available. There are some video on this website that you could look at and links to other places where you could get a lot of information about these animals that we call the feral swine or the wild pig. So that leads us to our next question of what is this animal that we're talking about? What is a pig? What is a wild pig? Well, we're all probably familiar with the somewhat pink, somewhat hairless, floppy-eared, curly-tailed barnyard pig. That derived from the Eurasian boar, which is native to Europe and Southeast Asia. We'll have a little bit more to say about its domestication on another slide or two, but people have been working with pigs for a long, long time. There's maybe 35 or more different breeds of pigs common in agriculture. But sometimes those pigs get released or they escape and they run around the wild and they turn into or revert back to their wild condition after a few generations. And when new pigs enter the wild or the environment, they breed with the pigs that are already there. And we end up with this mixture of domestic genes and wild pigs, although there aren't that many truly wild ones in America anymore. But we end up with this thing called a wild pig or a feral swine or a feral pig. Some of its distinguishing characteristics that I'm sure we're all very familiar with. It has erect or straight up ears, not the floppy ears like a barnyard pig. It has a straight tail, not the curly tail. Of course, it had that dark grizzly hair color. They're not always brown. They come in a variety of different colors. They do a lot of that, and that's why we have a lot of little pigs. To put this into perspective and give a little bit more background, all pigs came from this animal in Europe and Asia called the Eurasian wild boar. If you hunt in Germany or Poland or Belarus or the Ukraine or Turkey or those parts of the world, it's just called boar. They're just wild boar. I'll stop here and make a note that there's no such thing as a Russian wild boar. They don't exist. If you take a boar from Russia and take it to Poland, it's a Polish wild boar. If you take it to France, it's a French wild boar. It's just a pig. They were the original animal. They were domesticated in several places over thousands of years. Archaeologists tell us between 6,000 and 9,000 years ago. When the Europeans came to the New World, to North and South America, the Spanish first, and then French and English and others, Dutch. But the Spanish first, they brought domestic pigs with them. Those pigs escaped. They were free range. There weren't a lot of pens and holding facilities back in the 15 and 16 and 1700s. Those pigs were allowed to free range through the environment, feeding on whatever they could find. They were rounded up in the fall and turned into meat for the settlers. But as those animals lived in the wild away from domestication, they reverted to that wild appearance. If you follow the purple line over here on the left, occasionally Eurasian wild boar were introduced into hunting preserves in the United States, mostly in the early 1900s. They didn't stay on those hunting preserves. The classic poster child or classic story is the 1912 introduction at Hooper's Bald near Robbinsville, North Carolina. Those animals were turned loose into a pen, and the first time they had a hunt inside that pen, the pigs immediately jumped the fence and ran off into the mountains, and probably have never been seen since. But those pigs hybridized with the escaped domestic pigs, and the pigs that we have running around today are just domestic pigs reverted to a wild state. The correct term for these animals are just wild pigs or feral swine. There's nothing special about them. They're not considered wildlife legally. They're invasive exotic species that are very destructive. They're generally not protected under game laws. On private property, they could be hunted 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year on private property. But the take-home message here is that no matter what color it is, or no matter where you find it, if it's a pig in the wild in North America, it's just a pig. A pig is a pig, is a pig, is a pig. There's nothing special about these animals, and we need to stop glamorizing these animals. They're just destructive animals that are taking away from wildlife habitat and doing a lot of economic damage wherever they're found. I said earlier that they were brought by the Spanish. There's some record that Columbus may have brought some in 1492 or 1493 into the Caribbean islands. The first recorded occurrence of pigs on the North American continent dates back to 1538. Hernando de Soto landed in an area near what is today Tampa Bay. And he spent about 2.5 years or so wandering around the southern United States. So he landed down here near Tampa Bay, and he wandered up to the panhandle of Florida and Southwest Georgia and across the Ocmulgee River and the Altamaha and the Savannah River, and went over to Columbia, South Carolina, and didn't like the football team over there. So he left and went up through Asheville, North Carolina, and wandered around Alabama and Mississippi and Arkansas, and ended up back in New Orleans about 2.5 years later, or at least his men did. He is reported to have died somewhere in Arkansas. That's not important to this story. He had with him a herd of pigs, and those pigs were for food, and they traveled with his army. Of course, they escaped. They were traded with the native people. They escaped. They were stolen. They just disappeared, and they became the basis, the foundation of the animals that populated the southeastern United States, mostly river bottom swamps, but even in the mountains. And they've been around for about 500 years. So De Soto left hogs 500 years ago, 1539. Pigs were on farms all over North America throughout the colonial period and before the Civil War. After the Civil War, these animals, before and after the Civil War, they were free-range animals. They roamed the swamps, they roamed the mountains. People notched their ear to mark them, and they would round them up in the fall and then use them for food through the winter. In the 1930s, prior to World War II, we had the Depression. A lot of farms in the Southeast especially were abandoned. People moved to the cities looking for work. People went off to Europe to fight the war. They came back home. They moved back to cities and suburban areas, and those pigs were just left out in the woods and out in the swamps and more or less forgotten about for several decades until we get to the situation we're in today. On the right-hand side, here's a picture of a pig, a Piney Woods rooter. And this is a picture out of a 1925, 1930 newspaper in Effingham, North Carolina. And if you read the caption, it says, "Above is a feral hog, and their kind has roamed Effingham County and has been a nuisance for generations." And I got real excited when I found this. The picture and the caption and the story are from the 1920s, maybe early 1930s, and they have been a nuisance for generations. That puts wild pigs back into the time of the Civil War, post-Civil War, as a nuisance. We still have them in the swamps and throughout a lot of the Southeast, and they're still a nuisance. So they've been around for a long time. It's not a new problem. They've been here for nearly 500 years. And that just takes us to where we are today. If you take the hogs that DeSoto brought and the free range hogs that settlers released, just let wander the woods for hundreds of years, add those hundreds of years together, and that's where the current pig populations came from. They've just been out there in the background under the radar for close to 500 years. And it's only been in the last couple of decades or so that they've really got a lot of the press that we're hearing about more recently. If we look at the distribution maps from 1982 up to the present, we can see the number on the left-hand side. We can see the number of states that have pigs, at least some pigs reported in them. That list of states has grown and shrunk over the years. And you can see the 2021 map on the right-hand side there with all the counties shaded in that are known to have pigs. And I'll direct your attention to the Georgia map. That there's a few around Atlanta that aren't shaded in, but we're pretty much sure that every county in Georgia has a pig or more than one in it. This is just a graph looking at almost exactly the same thing from 1959, where we had pigs in about 10 states, up to about 2015, where the problem got really, really serious, where we had pigs in 40 out of the 50 states, including Hawaii, not known to be in Alaska. And that's about the time, 2015, 2016, 2017, when Congress got involved and really started to notice and started to put some resources into trying to find a solution to this pig problem. And we've been somewhat successful from 2015 to 2020, 2021. We've dropped the population from 40 states to 30 states. And some of those states only had a few isolated populations. They didn't have lots of pigs, so it was easy to eradicate them. And that was the rapid drop in that 6-year or so period. How fast are pigs spreading throughout the United States? We saw that they increased the number of states from 1959 to 2015. They're spreading pretty fast, but that's not the way they're spreading. This is the way they're spreading. People are capturing them, putting them in a trailer. There's probably beer involved, and it's not the pig that's drinking. And they're moving them about 65 miles an hour down the highway and reintroducing them into new places for hunting, probably for hunting purposes, probably selling hunts and making some money off of it. And that's the main, probably safe to say that's the main contributing factor to the spread of pigs today, is people moving them around to make money or to hunt. So that's the history of pigs. Let's talk a little bit about pig biology. And what do we know about pig biology, and what have you heard about pig biology, and see if we can share some facts and dispel some myths through this presentation. Pigs have the highest reproductive rate of any animal their size on the planet. That's a little hard to wrap your head around, but if you think about it, a pig weighs somewhere between 125 and 200 pounds. If you think about all the other animals that we have in North America that weigh about that same amount, there's a small list there, but you look at it, you look at a deer. Deer weighs about 130, 150, 160 pounds, about the same size as an average pig. Deer have 2 offspring, maybe 3, maybe one, but typically 2 offspring a year. Pigs can have 6 or more in a litter, and they could have 2 litters a year. And you can go down the list, pronghorn, moose, bear, the whole story there. Bears have 2 or 3 every other year. If a female sow bear, female bear has 2 offspring every other year, that's an average of 1 per year. Pigs can have 6 in a litter or 5 in a litter twice a year. So it's pretty easy to keep that in mind and then wrap your head around this concept that they have the highest reproductive rate of any ungulate or any animal their size in North America. Then you do some other animal husbandry, agriculture with them. They've been bred for 6, 7, 8,000 years to produce large litters. In a barnyard situation with food, veterinary care, antibiotics, highly nutritious food, a temperature neutral environment where it's not too hot, not too cold, where they don't have to wander around in the forest and contend with climbing mountains and turning over logs and rocks to feed. Feed is just dumped in front of their noses. They get big, they get fat, they get healthy, and they can produce up to 14 piglets in a litter. When you're trying to make a living in the wild, it doesn't work that way. The pigs in the wild, typical litters are between 4 and 6. A range could be between 1 and 12, but on average, they have about 5 in a litter. They often have 1, sometimes 2 in a year. These stories in some of the hunting literature about how they can have 13 in a litter 3 times a year, it's just not biologically possible. So trying to dispel a little myth here, they have 1 or 2 litters a year with 4 to 6 in a litter. They have incredibly high survival rates. If you think about a pig, they really don't have any natural predators. A bear might get one, an alligator might get one, a bobcat might get one might get hit on the highway, but they really don't have any natural predators. Mama is pretty protective of the little pigs. And once those pigs get up to be about 3 kilograms, 6 or 8 pounds, and they start running with mama, they have about a 95% survival rate. Real high survival rate compared to, say, maybe deer that might have 20% survival rate in some places. There's a lot of pigs in the United States. We don't really know how many, somewhere between 4 million and 11 million estimates of the range, estimates of the number, somewhere around 7 million plus or minus a few million. We don't really know how many. They're hard to count, and not a lot of people spend much time trying to count them. We got a lot of pigs. Again, about 95% survival once they get above 3 kilograms, about 7 or 8 pounds. So if we put that into some take-home messages, pigs have the highest reproductive rate of any animal their size on the planet. A friend of mine in Texas one time was giving a talk and he said, pigs are born pregnant. Well, they're not born pregnant, but it sure almost seems that way. In a litter of 8, 9 will survive. Again, about 95% survival, which is very, very high survival. Any fence that can hold water can hold a pig. So they're very intelligent animals, and they're very good at escaping from the pens that we put them in backyard herds or home situations. They don't stay where you put them. And this pig, I'm going to show you a picture of, didn't get this message, but the northern advance of pigs will be stopped by cold weather. And that pig didn't attend this talk, and he didn't get this memo. That's Canada, and Canada has a pig problem, and they do just fine in cold weather, which is not really all that surprising. If you think about where pigs came from, they came from Russia, Poland, Germany, Ukraine, Lithuania, that part of Eastern Europe that gets pretty doggone cold in the winter. So it's not surprising that pigs are moving into Canada, and Canada has a problem with pigs, and they do just fine in the snow, and they do just fine in the southern heat and the swamps. This talk is part of a larger presentation and workshop where we teach trapping. So with that in mind, a couple of words about trapping. Trapping is a process. It's not an event. There's no such thing as once and done. It's a process. You do it, and you do it again, 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 and you never stop doing it. The take-home message in trapping is that it is a process, not an event, and the number that you collect in a trap is important, but it's not the most important number. The most important number is the number that you leave behind. Here's a picture of some pigs we caught in Madison County a few years ago, and there are 27 dead pigs in that picture. And if you had caught 26, you'd be pretty proud of yourself, and you'd bragged all your friends at the barbershop and at church and at the football game that you caught 26 out of 27 pigs, and everybody would congratulate you. But notice that great big pig in the upper right-hand corner there where the arrow's at. Suppose that smart sow, that old, mature, adult, intelligent, experienced sow got away and you didn't catch her. It's the number that you leave behind that matter the most. Because if you had let that sow go and she was mature pig, chances are she either is or was going to get pregnant. And in 121 days or 115 days, about the gestation of a pig, she's going to drop a litter on or around May the 8th of 5 piglets. And just for the sake of argument, we're going to have a couple of male pigs in blue and a couple of female pigs in pink. And this is what's going to happen to that litter of pigs and their mama. Mama's going to get pregnant again. It's going to take her a few months. She's going to get pregnant. She's going to go through 112, 115, 116 day gestation period. She's going to have another litter, and she's going to have 6. And each of those piglets from the first litter, they're smaller. They're going to have only 4 each. But those 3 females are going to have 4 each. That gives you 12. So now you got mama and the 2 litters and the litter from the litter. And in 15 months, you're going to have 24 pigs. Well, if you had caught 26 out of 27 pigs in 15 months or less, you'd have 24 pigs back again. You'd be right back where you started from. It's not the number that you catch. It's the number that you leave behind. And if you had left behind that big sow, she could replace all those other pigs in just about a year and a month or 2. The number that you leave behind that are the most important. If you had caught 27 out of 27, there'd be no pigs left behind and you'd be without pigs for a while. Of course, other pigs would move in, but you'd be pig free as opposed to having that one pig repopulating your property really quickly. Another question comes up, are pigs a threat to humans? And the answer is an emphatic no. They're not going to chase you. They're not going to run you up a tree. They're not going to eat you. Pigs are basically cowards. They're going to run from you if you're out wandering in the woods. And if you're hunting and you hurt one, cripple one, and you corner it, it's going to try to escape. And if you're between it and the escape route, it's going to run over you or run through you. But if you're just walking around the woods, the chances of being attacked by a pig are extremely, extremely small. There's been reports of pigs going back thousands of years. But from 1825 to 2012, almost 200 years, there's only been 412 attacks documented. 70% of those were in the last 12 years. There's only been 100 fatalities documented in the literature in that same period. And about 84 of those in the last 10 or so years. Most of those in Europe. There's only been 1 or 2 fatalities in the United States since the late 1800s. So pigs are not a threat to humans in general. You can walk around the woods, and they're not going to chase you. So just to review a few of the things we've talked about, average pigs, somewhere between 125 and 250 pounds. I tell people that there's 38,000 students here at the University of Georgia, and they weigh about 125 to 250 pounds. And yeah, there's 1 or 2 that weigh 310 pounds, but they're called linemen and they play for Kirby Smart. So you might find a 300-pound pig, you might find a 500-pound pig, but that's very rare. Again, gestation about 112 to 115 days, almost half of a white-tailed deer. So we know we have a deer problem. Pigs can reproduce twice as fast and produce more young per litter. So they have an incredibly high reproductive rate. Average litter size in the wild around 5, range anywhere from 3 to 11. I said before 1 to 11, but that could be the range, but the average is much narrower than that, typically around 5 or so. They can have 1, sometimes 2 litters a year if they're healthy and conditions are good and they've got plenty of food. They can breed anytime during the year, so there could be young pigs on the ground in all 12 months of the year. Males reach maturity, sexual maturity, 4 to 6 months, females 6 to 10 months, so they can breed in their first year. People ask about the home range sometimes, and that's really hard to say. Their home range is very variable and very linear. They tend to move up and down stream corridors. They can move a few miles in a night, and their stories, radio track boars, males, will move 20 miles to find receptive sows for breeding opportunities. So home range is really hard to pin down. We classify pigs as opportunistic omnivores and habitat generalists. They'll live anywhere and they'll eat everything. They'll eat crops and mast and hard mass, soft mass, grasses, forbs, roots, bulbs, tubers, mushrooms, invertebrates, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, birds nests, bird eggs, quail, turkey, garbage, pet food, animal food. That's a long list. 85% of their diet is vegetable matter. They'll get into your deer feeders and eat a lot of deer corn, and then they'll eat the deer. What's wrong with this picture? That's a big pig, and it's mighty close to that guy. And it's photoshopped because the pig has no feet. You notice in this picture, it's photoshopped. That's a Russian, well, I said Russian. It's a Eurasian boar. And it's got no feet. And they aren't really that big relative to the size of that little tree in the background. This picture tells us what's wrong with pigs and pig hunting, or put it another way, what the problem is with pigs and pig hunting. Pig hunting is a cultural event. It's been glamorized and glorified on blogs and TV shows and hunting magazines. And yeah, every once in a while you get a big one. But this is what pigs really look like. There's 21 pigs caught in one trap, and they're all under 150 pounds. So no, they don't weigh 500 pounds, and no, they aren't going to chase you up a tree and eat you. They're increasing because they have a really high reproductive rate. They eat everything and live everywhere. They tend to exclude deer from food plots and feeders. But they're not all bad. Sometimes they give raccoons a lift to help them get to the feeder. Actually, I'm just joking. They really are all bad. And putting out all that bait or deer corn, pigs are intelligent, but they can't read. They don't know that's deer corn, so they eat it. And the fundamental rule of ecology that applies here, calories in from corn, babies out. The more calories you put into a pig, the more offspring they're going to produce. Calories in, babies out. So they're eating a lot of deer corn. They're eating a lot of crops. They're competing with wildlife for a lot of acorns and other food items. And they're turning all those calories into more pigs. That's why trapping is a process. And you got to get them all, because the one you leave behind, we know what happens when you leave one pig behind, what she can do and what she can turn into in just a few months. Another problem with pigs are diseases. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with diseases because, again, when we do this as a workshop, the state veterinarian spends a good bit of time talking about pig diseases and how they interact with humans. But pigs can host 40 or more different diseases and parasites, some of which are deadly to humans, to livestock, and to our pets. We can get swine brucellosis, tularemia, trichinella, salmonella, E. coli. They're a threat to livestock. Veterinarians stay up at night, worry about the threat from wild pigs. If somebody puts a disease into the wild pigs and it gets into the domestic disease, that disease gets into the domestic herd, it will be devastating. Billions and billions of dollars of devastation to agriculture in a very, very, very short time. Just finishing up with some of the work we've done on pigs and attitudes and problems. My first job was in 1976 up in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park working with pigs. In 1977, a study was published in the Southern Journal of Applied Forestry, a survey of Southern foresters and wildlife managers. And in 1977, 86% of those Southern foresters and wildlife managers said that wildlife damage from pigs was infrequent or non-existent. 20 years later in California, half the problems had pig problems. 87% of Texas landowners said that feral pigs compete with other food. 2013, 58% of Illinois farmers and landowners said that pigs were a severe threat to wildlife habitat and native wildlife. And we did a survey in 2014. 53% of people in our survey said there was a decline in other wildlife, mostly deer, quail, turkey, and rabbits. And 78% of those people believe the decline was related to pigs. So as we saw in one of those earlier slides, where the number of pigs in 1959 went from 10 states to 2015, where it went to 40 states, along with that, increasing number of states and increasing population are increasing number of complaints and increasing impact of pigs on native wildlife and native wildlife habitat. Another study I was involved in here at the University of Georgia in 2002, we surveyed county agents and asked them about wildlife damage in general, and a couple of the questions were related to pigs. 31% of county agents in Georgia in 2002 said they had received some complaints about pigs. We redid that survey 14 years later, and 71% of county agents said they had received some complaints about pigs. So the problem is getting worse in Georgia. We asked people how they thought about pigs, and just to pull out one or two here, I enjoy seeing wild pigs. Only 7% of the people in our survey agreed with that statement. What other one is real interesting here? Wild pigs should be eliminated wherever possible. Only 18% disagreed with that. 82% of people in our survey said that they agreed with that, that pigs should be eliminated wherever possible. Pigs cost a lot of money to agriculture, row crops, orchards, pecans, hay, pasture, roads, quail courses. If you're a quail plantation and you're trying to run a quail course, pigs get into there and root up the course. To cemeteries, to yards, to houses, to fences, to irrigation equipment. Pigs can be pretty destructive. One of the old estimates, $1.5 billion per year. New estimates, 15, 16 years later, the economists are telling us that number is $2.5 billion annual damage or more. And you can see how it's spread out. No states are immune from their damage. Going back to that 2014 survey in Georgia, about $99 million in damage to crops, about $52 million in damage to other items, irrigation, roads, ditches, pond banks, fences, that kind of thing. About $150 million estimated total damage per year in Georgia. And this number is getting old now too. The numbers are probably higher than that, just factoring in inflation and the value of crops today compared to 8 or 9 years ago. So again, as we saw from one of our earlier slides, you can have 25 pigs. You can kill 80% of them and you still have 5 pigs. Those 5 pigs can rapidly reproduce and replace all the ones that you took out. So again, it's not the number that you get, it's the number that you leave behind that matters the most. We want to turn these pigs into these pigs. And the way to do that is effective trapping on a local scale with 100% mortality. we understand we're not going to kill all the pigs in the state of Georgia. We're not trying to get rid of all the pigs in the state of Georgia. We're trying to educate people about pig biology and teach effective trapping methods so that we can have local eradication to solve problems on individual farms and individual properties. And we'll work on the rest of it eventually. That's the end of my presentation. I appreciate your time. And thank you for listening.